Alright, so welcome back. In our last video, we were taking a look at how to use isometric dot paper in order to help create the sense of three-dimensionality. Today we're going to be looking at using contour and using the same principles in order to replicate this still life here that's a little bit more complex. Right? Instead of having the single object, this block here, I've added in a cylinder and a triangular prism onto the composition as well. And what we're going to be working on now is thinking about how to create a more interactive, dynamic composition and then figuring out how to draw it. So this is where we're going to end up with this composition here. But what I want us to be thinking about, right, is this idea of creating an interesting composition. So if I quickly kind of just take these away, right, there's a concept in art that's called planar, which means that everything kind of goes in sort of certain levels of visual depth, and there's something that's close, there's something that's medium, there's something that's far, and then there might be something that's even farther off in the distance, right? And so when we stack things up and we have all of the main lines in our composition going in the same direction, we end up creating this planar effect, right? And although it works in many cases, there are some times where it's maybe a little bit more beneficial to create a more dynamic interrelationship between the different parts of the physical space that the objects are occupying. And in order to do that, it's really, really simple. Right? We just need to work on changing the angles at which they are. So instead of everything being flat, one against each other all the way through the entire composition, now that the angles create points of intersection. Right? So that's one thing, right, is using diagonals to help create visual interest. The other thing that we can do too is we can start thinking about how might we add different levels, right? And that's something, another strategy that we could end up employing as well. Actually, this one's kind of fun. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to work with this sketch design here. We'll get this one kind of started out on our sheet of paper. Okay? So for this, you can use a ruler if you like. I'm going to be doing mine freehand in order to kind of establish where I want everything to be, and then I might go back in and then clean things up with a ruler afterwards. So the key here, right, just like in the last one, is to think about parallel lines. And when I'm doing these types of drawings, I tend to kind of start with one of the objects and then work from there. So for me, based on this composition, I'm going to use this block here as my foundation, and I'm going to start by drawing the vertical corner, which is right in here. Okay? And then extending these lines out on a fairly sharp angle, okay, for here and for here. And these lines, again, right, I'm wanting them to be fairly parallel. And then I need to get the back edge, which is going to be over here, and I'm going to capture that here. I'm not worrying about these little cutouts quite yet. And for the next edge, I'm actually going to be drawing these without really worrying too much about the fact that the triangular prism is blocking it. So this is coming across, right? Top and bottom need to be parallel, and the vertical edge on this one needs to be parallel as well. Okay, and from here, I'm going to create the top. This edge and the back edge need to be fairly parallel, and then this edge and that edge. Right? And so very quickly, I'm able to establish a good sense of what that middle intermediary block is all about without having to get into a tremendous amount of detail. Right? The next thing that I'm going to do is I want to start blocking in this triangular prism. Right? So what I'm going to notice is that this point here, down at the bottom, right, is if I follow this line down through, right, and I'm going to just kind of create that imaginary one, that point is just a little bit above there, right? And when I draw it up, it needs to extend, just to about the same height as here. So I'm going to kind of just roughly sketch this one in. And again, now this line and this line need to be parallel. So I'm going to draw that one across, and then the outer edge here, this line and this line are parallel, and I'm able to start blocking in these different surfaces. Right, when I get to the end, this line here and this line, I'm going to try and create that sense of them being parallel as well. And then I can, because this is a triangular prism, I'm going to join those two lines together. Right, so at this point, now that I'm starting to define each of these different shapes, I'm going to come in and erase the lines from that are no longer visible on that first block that I drew. And this is just going to help me to be able to see the two objects a little bit more clearly. Right? So as I'm going through this, I'm also I'm self-assessing. I'm seeing that these two lines are coming away from each other. So I need to make sure that I'm being a little bit more careful. And I'm going to bring those in a little bit better. Okay. And as I'm going, I'm pressing a little bit harder, but I'm not going super crazy with that. Okay, so now that I have this one in, I'm going to start creating the piece that comes, the cutout. Right, so just like we did in the last video, I'm going to draw a couple of little lines, draw that in. This now gets erased. Right, and I'm making sure that this line here is parallel to the line for the top edge. And this line is parallel as well, so that these work together. This line, and then this line, and this line, and this line all need to be parallel. And this one also needs to be parallel, which is going to create that interior cutout effect. Right? So this is going to extend all the way through. This is going to extend all the way through, and this is where, you know, the ruler might actually be kind of useful, because now I can kind of like line that one up and make sure that I'm getting them fairly a little bit more accurate. All right, and again, making sure that we're using our eraser. I need to know which lines need to be removed. So now that I'm getting out to this far end, right, it's kind of hard to see this back here, but there's a little bit of a return, so that needs to get drawn in. That line here needs to be parallel to the ones that are going off in this direction, and then I can draw that line, that vertical line up, in order to complete that part of the design. Likewise, I'm going to extend this out. Right, we have the little notch on the opposite side. Draw that out, and right, we can see just a tiny, tiny little bit of that return and that little detail in there. Right. So when we're coming along, right, really quickly, by just remembering about these parallel lines, right, and thinking about which direction the lines need to be going in, we're able to recreate this sense of three-dimensionality fairly quickly. Right, and the last thing here is the cylinder, right, and you can't really see it in the camera here, so I'm going to kind of shorten this out. I'm going to kind of figure out where I want this edge and this edge to go, right, and making sure again that they're parallel. They should be following these parallel lines that are throughout the composition, and I'm going to create a bit of an ellipse shape up at the top in order to give that cylinder a little bit more clear sense of volume. Okay, last step for this, okay, is I'm going to just include a ground line, okay, to indicate sort of where the edge of the surface, the horizontal surface is, and the background. Okay, so in not too much time, right, that was about 10 minutes, we're able to quickly recreate, right? If this is the first time that you are working on a sketch like this, it may end up taking a little bit longer. Don't fret. It is a bit of a learning process, and give yourself the time to learn and to practice and to make mistakes, because the more you practice this, the easier it will be in order to see these different surfaces. All right, so good luck. Give this a try. If you have any questions, make sure that you're asking. I can't wait to see what you're able to put together. Have a great day. Bye.